still eating, please continue eating, but we are moving ahead with our program. We've got a couple of great recorded speakers coming up, and I just wanted to read a quick quote from a book that I've just started reading. You see my little pile of books up here. I'm a bit of a book nerd. And this one is, "Don't drop the mic. The power of your words can change the world." And it says, "Great men and women have opened their mouths and changed the world. You and I wield this same kind of power." Right? And with that, I would like to introduce our friend who I so wish could have been here today, but he is a U.S. Merchant Marine Officer, John Petrolino, and he is off on a ship somewhere. He is an NRA and USCCA firearms instructor and writer. He's the author of Decoding Firearms, a text for beginning firearms owners and users. John is a regular contributor to Bearing Arms and Ammo Land News. He also provides blog entries for JM4 Tactical, and his work has been featured in several other online news sources as well as print. And with that, John Petrolino.
Hello, I'm John Petrolino, and you may know me as a frequent contributor of Bearing Arms or Ammo Land News. You may know me from my book, Decoding Firearms, an easy-to-read guide on general gun safety and use. You may know me from having had the pleasure of being on one of the many wonderful shows that several content creators that are involved with this conference today. And you may not know me at all, and to those of you I don't know, it's a pleasure to have you today and for you to listen to what I have to say. I want to talk to you about my journey as a Second Amendment writer and, by extension, an advocate. The first thing that I want to do is ask you a question to think about. Who do you work for? That may seem like an easy question to answer, but we'll just set it aside for now. My story's kind of twofold. There is the story of developing as a writer and the story of becoming a firearm trainer and 2A advocate. These two paths did not intersect or intertwine until I gained many years of experience and also a few opportunities. First, the gun stuff. I was not necessarily raised surrounded by firearms, but I was introduced to shooting and the shooting sports at an early age. Things progressed organically, starting with air rifles and moving on to rimfire rifles. By the time I was in elementary school, I went on my first hunting trip, and hunting became a regular practice that I would partake in with my father. I was also involved in the Boy Scouts, where I further got introduced to the shooting sports. While in college, I had the opportunity to be on the college rifle team at the academy. As an adult, I did not actually purchase my own firearms, ones that were not given to me, until 2009. Then there's the writing stuff. I had heavily been interested in being a writer going back to my high school days. By the time I graduated high school and moved on to college, I started to immerse myself in literature, and my writing was more creative in nature. Before, I was looking through Freedom of Information Act requests for Ammo Land News or breaking stories and offering commentary on Bearing Arms. I wrote poetry. Like some of the other fine Second Amendment advocates we know and love, I too had a different path to where I am today. That path involved a ponytail and dim-lit cafes where I was involved in the poetry scene. Before I was interviewing GOP candidates for the New Jersey gubernatorial election, I had over 100 poems published through dozens of publications and 2 books of poetry released. Whenever I talked with other writers or professors about being a writer, the most common thing I'd hear was, write what you know. That and write, and write some more. And then there were sage pieces of advice like, you need to be published to get published. As if that's helpful. Read. Reading is important. And this is where we can find both our voices and styles that we wish to adopt. In our context, it's important to know what's going on. So what did I do? I wrote. I wrote a lot. If I was not working on a specific piece, whatever it was, poetry or prose, I was journaling daily. I kept my thoughts flowing on the page. By constantly keeping my writing brain engaged, I improved. I spent my free time traveling in the creative writing circles and made contacts. I also submitted my work to as many publications as possible, and the rejection letters kept piling up. Eventually, I met with the editor of a small underground magazine. We hit it off, and he published my first poem. From there, it seemed like a breeze to get work out there. Having that previously published in XYZ magazine in my bio did appear to pave the way for more acceptance letters. My work was being featured in literary magazines, magazettes, zines, and eventually anthologies. All of that came with being engaged with the community and also continuing to write more and more. Eventually, I was being invited to be featured reader at different series and spoke at several high schools and was asked to give presentations at colleges and universities. As good as things were going in the literary world, there were certain cultural elements that did not necessarily fit. To me, freedoms are freedoms. It did not matter if they're the First Amendment or the Second Amendment. These were both civil rights, and I quickly learned not everyone had the same respect for other freedoms. To put it gently, the all-embracive creative writing community did not really embrace many of my views on liberty. Apparently, all liberties are equal, but some liberties are more equal than others. Things did not really start to take off for me in the shooting world until 2012. Yes, I was going to the range and practicing and shooting. Yes, I was spending a good amount of time shooting clays at the trap and sporting clays field. But when Hurricane Sandy hit the Jersey Shore is when I really became hyper-vigilant to being responsible for my own self-defense. It was then, when the power was out for a week, that I decided to keep a firearm loaded and ready for use in case of need. Following that epiphany, which something seemed to organically evolve, I started training. I was required to take a basic safety class for joining a local gun club. It was then that I realized there was so much more to learn. From there, I took another basic class and then moved on to my NRA instructor level classes. Over the next 2 years, I got certified in basic pistol, rifle, shotgun, refused to be a victim instructor, range safety officer, as well as personal protection inside the home. Since I live in New Jersey, I became acutely aware of the horrible laws that we have. It seemed like the law-abiding gun owner was always under attack. Why? Because we are. Because of the climate here, I got engaged in being an advocate. I started joining as many 2A groups as I could and became the guy that wrote letters to our politicians. In a chance post I saw online, a firearm-related website was looking for contributors. I figured, what did I have to lose? I reached out and they quickly responded. We talked about a freshman piece for me to write, and I was sent off my instructions. And right I did. I probably wrote too much, which seems to be a problem for me even today. But at around 6,000 words, the article was more of an expose. When I polished the piece, I proudly sent it off back to the editor, and then nothing. I waited a little while longer. Still nothing. I was getting the cold shoulder. At this point, I was more pissed that I had spent so much time on the piece and that the editor would not even give me the time of day to say, buzz off. After all, it was he that said, yes, you sound passionate about this subject. I think you should write about it. Not knowing exactly what to do with this new piece, I threw a Hail Mary to AmmoLand News. Talked to Freddie over there, and he decided to run the article. He agreed it was long, but he gave me a shot. Over the next few years, I'd send off pieces here and there and would have a fairly good success rate on getting my work to see the light of day. I would also expand further to other publications and had work slowly trickle out through the Shore News Network, the Save New Jersey blog, and a piece with the truth about guns, and then bearing arms. In 2019, I helped a trainer in Massachusetts edit his book and see it through publication. While working on the book, I had several thoughts about what I would do different in it. I was also working on a class that I was writing. The class was being put together to fill what I'd consider a small void in the training offerings I was able to present. I wanted to be able to give my students the program that could be modified to fit their needs. I also wanted to have a handout that I could give them as a training aid, something that they could take away with them and reference at a future date, so they can have that. I got started on drafting an outline based off the lesson plan I wrote for the class. By the time I got done laying out what I thought was absolutely necessary and putting it to paper, I did not have a handout. I had a 266-page book, and that is how Decoding Firearms came about. What does this all mean? This means that with experience and practice, I was able to put my craft to use on something I felt passionate about. It also means that when you see opportunity, no matter how small it may seem, you should take it. You do miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You never know when a small idea can turn into something much bigger. A pamphlet that turned into a book. Or an ad seeking a two-way writer turning into a side hustle being a gun writer. Since the release of Decoding Firearms, I've become a regular writer for AmmoLand News, Bearing Arms, and JM4 Tactical's blog. I'm still what I'd consider the new kid on the block when it comes to 2A writers, with about 200 firearm-related articles having been published in comparison to the thousands that my colleagues have. That being said, I feel I've learned a thing or two, and I want to share it with you. When writing or working on a piece, if possible, use video. Video sells and captures people's attention. What's in the video might be what is needed to get the reader to read your entire piece. On more than one occasion, I've turned to different colleagues to help me by cutting up videos and hosting them when they're relevant to what I'm discussing. I embed them into the work and we both benefit. This segues into another bit of advice. Network. The writers, the content creators, the bloggers, the radio show hosts, you name it. All of us alternative media types, we need to connect with another, and we need to lean on each other or reference each other. I've had plenty of story tips that came from one content creator's video or another. Instead of just stealing the concept, I'll give credit where credit is due, cite the work, and have the video embedded into the piece. This sharing and cross-pollination is important to get further reach for all of our messaging. This goes the same for the content creators. I've been lucky enough to have radio hosts, content creators, and other media personalities reference my work. It's nice when they cite the work and throw a hat tip in with a link to find the piece. On a few occasions, I, along with others involved in these presentations today, have had content creators outright steal the research that we've done without giving credit. We're in this together. It's not harmful, painful, or difficult to say, yo, thank you XYZ Media for the idea I got from your video for an article. We all put a lot of work and effort, and spreading the love is okay. And naturally, from me to you creators out there that do credit my work, thank you very much for doing so. I appreciate you. Get with as many 2A organizations or groups as you can. Make personal connections with the people doing the work in these groups, and have them put you on their distribution lists. Press releases are a perfect way to get information fast and be able to put out an article, a piece, a video, or any bit of content. Add these groups and persons to your network and turn to them when you need guidance and quotes. If you're working on a piece on something, say, in New Jersey, where I'm from, turn to the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs for their stance on whatever you're reporting on. Massachusetts, how about Gun Owners Action League? Florida, you have Florida Carry available. Ohio, there's the Buckeye Firearms Association. You get the point. The 2A news coming from the 2A groups is important and needs to be put out there. If you have a niche, capitalize on it. I was recently referred to as the legislation guy, and I jokingly said, I'm the legislation guy? Well, why is that? Because when there's new legislation put out, I try to report on it. Sure, I cover a lot more than just legislation, but it is something I pay a lot of attention to. If you're into training, write articles about training. Are you a hardware guy or gal? Put out content on firearm features or how to clean them. Whatever you feel most interested in. This is something to focus on. Remember, write what you know. And that goes for the podcasters and video content creators too. When I got advice about writing, as noted earlier, I was told to read a lot. This is where things can get very consuming very fast. Find content that you like and take it in. There are a ton of quality podcasts, radio shows, content creator channels, and places to read Second Amendment news and commentary. Yes, this can consume your life. But being informed is really important when it comes to reporting this stuff. With that, remember the question I asked earlier. Who do you work for? When we navigate this world as content creators, writers, alternate media types, we need to be able to answer that question. If what you're doing does not directly and positively serve the Second Amendment, then you need to stop and think about what you're doing and why. Because at the end of the day, we all need to realize we work for the Second Amendment, and that's where our focus should be. Thanks for watching and listening. Please check me out online at johnpetrolino.com for more information about me, my work, and if you wish to contact me. And if you're interested, check out Decoding Firearms, available on Amazon. Stay safe out there and think before you do.
Over 20 years, and as an avid shooter and teacher, he became a firearms instructor. It seemed like the next logical step. He is certified by the NRA, Massachusetts State Police, and Utah BCI. He combined his love for music and his love for guns and created the popular gun grams. Has everybody seen the gun grams? Yes, and if you haven't, do it immediately, like after this video, but immediately. It's a video series where he plays the trumpet and shoots his gun. I think it's always a Glock, right? Are you a Glock guy? Okay, all right. And he's a very certain person as well. In rhythm and time to the music, and his newest YouTube channel is titled Riding Shotgun with Charlie, which is very much what you think it might be. You're sitting in a car, and there's cameras on every angle of you, and he is grilling you with the most intense questions ever. But my favorite was when a bunch of us piled up inside of a tiny rental car. What state were we in? Florida. And we called it the clown car, and I thought, you know, the other side's going to, right? A bunch of two-way advocates in a clown car. But it was pretty terrific until we almost got pulled over. But that's another story for dinner. Okay, without further ado, Charlie Cook.
Did I wipe the lens off? Oh, no. No.
If I know, I liked camera number 1, and you had to go to camera number 3. Number 3 and I don't see eye to eye.
Oh, stop. Even though we live in the time of the Jetsons, we want to try to make sure that when we communicate on video, we don't look like the Flintstones. My name is Charlie Cook, so I'd like to present a few things that you can do to maybe enhance your video presentations or your video interviews. These are even some tips that you can use whether you're doing a Facebook Live video or whether you're doing an Instagram video or an Instagram Live video, possibly even a TikTok. Possibly, although I will say, when I watch TikTok, I think after I'm done watching it, I'm a little less smart than I was before I started watching it. For the last year and a half, since we've had the virus that shall not be named, a lot of us are communicating on video these days, whether they're video meetings or video interviews, whether we're the interviewer or the interviewee. And the generic term that we kind of give them is Zoom. Zoom has been the platform that we use, but again, we use it generically as video interviews. It's kind of like calling it tissue a Kleenex. 8, 10 years ago, a video interview was just a Skype. And Skype was also an online platform where you could communicate on video and or audio. But now we all call them Zooms. Let's talk about lighting. So where I'm at right now, I've got 3 ring lights that are on me. I have one from the front and one from either side. What we're going to do is we have these set on the warm setting, not on the hot setting, but on the warm setting, so the lights aren't so bright on me. And now we're going to change them. And even with this light setting, you can see the light has changed on me. With most of the ring lights, there are 3 different settings. Here's the 3rd setting. You can see that the light texture changes a little bit. My complexion changes. I'm sure the background is changing as well. The way that I like to do these is on the warm setting, so it's a little bit bright and a little bit warm and not so bad. I like to keep them like this. Now, even though I have 3 lights on me, I'm going to turn off the light that is on my left. And you can see that the light comes at me from one side and I get a little bit of shadow over here. And now we're going to turn off the light in the middle, and you can see that the light changes a little bit on me as well. And we're going to turn off the light on my right. And you can see that there's a little more shadow over here, and my face over here is probably a little bit different. Now we've got all 3 lights back on. If you want to try to make yourself look like Two-Face, we can change one side, and now I look a little hotter on one side and a little warmer on the other. Or we can change the lights on the other side. So I'm warmer on this side and hotter on this side. Or we can play disco lights. Disco, disco Chuck. So I'm in a room in a basement with just the 3 ring lights. If we turn on some of the recessed lighting, it looks like this. And you can see that it probably isn't too bad, but maybe a little too bright. Now, if I get too close to the recessed light, then I've probably got some heat coming down here. You might be able to see my bald spots. And if I get too close, then I'm probably going to have a little bit of a darker image on my face. I'm also going to talk about some lighting while I'm sitting at a desk and I have a white wall behind me, which you'll see later in the presentation. Some other things you want to think about is how you're dressed. Sometimes you can do video presentations where you're much more casual in a t-shirt or a button-down shirt or a blouse. I don't wear blouses, but what I like to do is I like this. I like to wear a plain black t-shirt and a suit jacket. Kind of like what Michael Jordan wore back in the 1990s. Even though I'm not tall and a basketball player, he looks a lot better than I do. But it makes me feel comfortable and it makes me feel good. And part of the video presentation is making sure that you feel good, so you do a good presentation and you do a good talk and you do a good interview. So if you have some logoed shirts or a shirt with a logo or an image on it or some custom-made shirts that you want to wear, you can use those as well, like this. You can wear one of your logoed shirts or one of your other logoed shirts or one of your other logoed shirts or one of your friends' shirts or one of your other friends' shirts, or you can wear the shirt of superheroes. Or you can go back to the regular plain shirts. Now you also need to make sure your hair looks good, especially if you've done a number of wardrobe changes. Let's talk about the condition of your shirts. Do you have a lot of stains on them? The lights will accentuate the stains on your shirt. Ask me how I know. Some of us in the gun community live by what we call POGO. POGO is pants on, gun on. And when you're doing these interviews, you can be Wall Street from the waist up and Walmart from the waist down. I feel less WT calling it WM. Something else you might want to think about is how you're going to set up your phone if you're going to use the camera on your phone. Now I'm here, I've got a table that's kind of high, and I have a coffee mug. And if I put my phone on the coffee mug, I get the slip and fall, which would be bad. Or I can get this where I miss all of my face. So I'm going to scoot back here, and this looks a little bit better. One thing you want to be careful of is the infamous up the nose shot. It's my two biggest fears of public speaking. One of them is having a bat in the cave. There's no way to put it. But I have this complete phobia. I have this complete phobia of something being in my nose. The other thing that I'm concerned about in public speaking is making sure my fly is up. And that's a little freaky when you go up and do a speech and your fly is down. So those are my two biggest fears. So we're going to put the camera here. Now it's nice to have something. I might have to scoot back a little bit. Oh, by the way, while we're here, a little branding on my left-hand side here is kind of nice. But so using the setup that I have here is not really ideal because it cuts off part of my head. Or I could look like this, which isn't too bad, but it still looks kind of weird. The next thing I could use is a phone stand. This might be a little bit better. Let's check this out with the coffee mug over here. And we've got the phone stand. The phone stand's a little higher. Obviously we want to make sure it's adjusted properly and make sure it looks okay. So we can probably tilt it up and we can tilt it down. And of course we want to make sure our brand is here. Make sure our eyes look good. Make sure this is level. So this is always something that you want to check out, obviously, before you film a show. The last thing that you can use is an integrated light that has a phone holder on it. Now this guy isn't plugged in, but it has a phone holder, and we can use that here, and it's got its own light, and we could lower our table so that it works out much better. So the nose thing is something that is a big issue with some people, and the important thing to make sure people aren't looking up your nose is to make sure that the camera is above your eyes. Now where it's at right now on this particular camera on my phone, which one of the things they say is you probably shouldn't point at the camera, but one of the things that you want to do is make sure that the camera is about eye level, but certainly above your nose. So right now, the way this is set up, it's a little bit too high. All right, we're good for here?
Hey, Charlie, blow your nose.
Let's talk a little bit about lighting. So right now, all I have are the Ring cameras, and I have 2 over here, and I have 1 over here. Now, I'll put on the room lights. So with the lights coming on from the recessed lights in the ceiling, you can see it certainly changes things as well. So with the light behind me is not too bad, but I want to make sure that it's not pointing right at the camera. And if I put the light on that's over my right shoulder, it probably really brightens everything up behind me. I've got like all the lights going. Probably not a great way to have things lighted. So now I've got the lights behind me with the ring lights, but none of the recessed lights. So this certainly adds a different texture as well. And if I turn this light off, it still looks a little different, probably a little uneven. So now the lamp over my shoulder is definitely distracting, so let's turn that off. And what I have are 2 floodlights on either side of me. The floodlights are just regular lights that you'd get at a hardware store, and they might be a little bit too bright. So maybe you could still use them, but maybe get a couple of light bulbs that are a little less bright. Let's talk about the background. Some people don't want to have anything in the background, and I get that, but some people want to have everything in the background. You want your background to be kind of clean. I've been on a lot of podcasts and shows with people that have the same background, like they have a little studio set up in their office, which is wonderful, and I kind of like that myself. I know that when I do the Polite Society podcast from my place, that I always use the same area, and I always have the same background. You don't want it to be too cluttered. You do want to show your accomplishments, maybe some family pictures, maybe some other awards and some other achievements that you've gotten. You may want to subliminally post some of your friends, like the gun for higher range that's back here, or the gun grandma and the writing shotgun with Charlie stickers that are in the back. Do you see those?
I see them.
What you want to be careful of is to not have too much clutter behind you. Now, I know if you watch me film the Polite Society podcast, as soon as you turn the camera around, you are going to see more clutter than you want. The other thing that you can do is if your camera is not high enough, you can stack some books underneath your camera or underneath your laptop. When I do the Polite Society podcast, I do it from my kitchen table. I have a wall behind me with some pictures of my kids and some other pictures and some awards that I've received. But I also have a box that I put underneath my laptop so that you don't see up my nose and you don't have the angle where you're kind of looking up like I'm towering over somebody. And I have a bench shot. I have a good friend of mine bought some bench shot glasses with the writing shotgun with the Charlie logo on them, and I put that underneath my laptop so that the camera on my laptop is even with my face and it's not underneath my nose. If you're on the show and you're promoting some of your products, you want to keep your products nearby. Like I've got this copy of John Petrolino's Decoding Firearms, an easy-to-read guide on general gun safety and use, which you can find on Amazon.com. But I've got it right here on the table. It's easy to get to, and I've kind of prepared myself. Some other stuff that you want to do is you might want to restart your computer about 15 or 20 minutes before your interview. I know for my computer it seems to take forever, I think is how long it takes. So I like to do mine about a half hour before the shows that I'm going to be on. I like to restart my computer so that everything is nice and fresh. I don't have any other Chrome windows that are open, and I try not to do anything else with my computer. Like I don't have any other apps that are running and I'm not rendering any video or doing anything else. Another thing that you should get is a hardwire to go from your modem to your computer. This gives you a much more secure connection and probably a faster connection than the Wi-Fi. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was making some videos with some of the other Polite Society podcast folks, and we were calling them, I think it was Firearms 101, but we had a lot of people on that were guests, and we had a core group of people from the Polite Society podcast that were doing interviews with people because everyone was stuck at home. And one of the things that I needed to do was I needed to go to my local Best Buy and get a 50-foot cable or a 50-foot wire to go from my modem to my living room and to my kitchen. And 50 feet was certainly more than enough. So they do make these extra long that are about 100 feet as well. So what you want to do is you want to hardwire your laptop or your computer to your modem. Something else that you want to consider are microphones and headsets. Now, you don't have to go out and get a really nice tabletop microphone to use for an interview, but you might want some sort of a microphone. And there are a number of types of things that people use. Some people use the lavalier mic that will connect to the computer. Some people have the headsets with a microphone connected to a little arm that comes down. I know there are a lot of people that just use a wired headset that they put into their ears, and it's something you'd get from your phone, and it's got a little microphone on it. And I know there are some people that use the AirPods as well, a wireless connection or Bluetooth connection from their earbuds to their phone. So people use those for connections as well. If you get an opportunity to make sure that this connection works, that would be great. I know last year for my GRPC video, I went and I bought some wireless AirPods or generic AirPods because I am tactically frugal. But I got some wireless headphones at Walmart for a whopping 20 bucks. When I went to make video from my phone and I connected the earbuds to my phone, there was no connection for video, so that kind of stunk. A lot of times your camera or your computer might have a mic of its own, and that will probably work as well. But if you get an opportunity to test this before the interview, then you should definitely do that. If you're giving an interview, then you do want to invest in some sort of a microphone or some sort of earbuds and headphones that work well if you're going to be hosting a show. If you are the interviewer, you might want to get some sort of a bio on the person that you're going to be interviewing. Some people in their interviews like to have certain questions that they ask all of their guests. Some people like to have conversations that are a little bit more free-flowing, but there are also people that like to have good, firm questions, and they kind of know what they're getting into. There are some people that are very good interviewers, and they will send you a little bio sheet ahead of time, so you give them their bio and you give them some sort of a picture that they might want to use. And they also might ask you some questions on what you would like to talk about. You know, one of the things that I always thought was kind of interesting is I would watch the late night shows when I was much younger, and you'd see these people go on with Letterman or Jay Leno or Johnny Carson even for some of you folks. And they would go on and Johnny Carson would say something like, hey, have you had anything funny happen on any flights recently? And then the comedian or the guest would just sit there and roll out some 4-minute story of something funny that happened to them on a flight. And I would sit there like, how did Johnny Carson know something funny happened to them while they were flying? Like, I get there's a real good possibility that could happen, but how do they know? How do they know? And that's with the pre-interview questions. So Johnny Carson's people would have some questions that the guest would know would be coming up. Or maybe the guest would say, here's what I'd like to talk about. So if you're on either end of the interviewer or the interviewee, you want to get your bio to the person that's interviewing you. You want to have all of your social media links, your website, your email address, your Facebook page, your Instagram, your Twitter, your MySpace, whatever it is that you're using. You want to let people know how they can reach out to you. So you want to give them some sort of a bio with all of that information. And you want them to know what kind of questions to ask you so you know what to talk about and the kind of things that you're going to be covering. Going along with the pre-show preparation or the pre-show prep is you want to narrow down and you want to figure out what it is that you would like to talk about. I've done a number of interviews where particularly on the Polite Society podcast, where I keep a pen and paper nearby so that if someone else is speaking, I can write down what I'm thinking. Also, it gives you the opportunity to have a little cheat sheet for yourself and take some notes. So here are some other things that you might want to consider. Don't eat when you're doing an interview. I've seen plenty of Zoom interviews where people don't seem to know that they're on video, and they end up with this big bowl of cereal, and they're just shoveling food into their mouth and chewing like a cow chewing a curd. Nobody wants to see that. The other thing is drinking. Some people like to maybe have an adult beverage to loosen them up and relax them a little bit, and that's fine, but you obviously do not want to have too much, and you don't want to be intoxicated. A lot of people have water bottles that they like to use, so if you get your own water bottle, use that. That's totally cool. So what you might want to do is, if you do feel the need to have something to drink to whet your whistle, is put your drink in a coffee mug, especially if it's got your brand on it. You can use something like that. You can put water in there. You can put tea. You can put whatever, Coca-Cola, whatever it is that your beverage of choice is. But put that in put it in a regular coffee mug so that you're not showing everyone that you'd like Pepsi over Coca-Cola. By the way, I like Coca-Cola over Pepsi. And when I go to a restaurant, if they have Pepsi, I ask for a root beer. One of the good ones is very much like resetting your computer. Reset your bowel. If you get a chance to go to the bathroom before your interview, that might be a good idea so you don't have to sit there and sweat bullets and cut the interview short. So one of the things that I've been doing for several years now is I have been in Toastmasters. And Toastmasters is a great place to work on your speaking skills. And honestly, Toastmasters is where I started making videos, which led me to writing Shotgun with Charlie, which led me to AmCon. Once we went to virtual meetings, and let's face it, virtual means not real. Yeah, so we would have these not real meetings via Zoom, and we had one person that always seemed to do their meeting from their bedroom, and it's not bad enough that they're doing it from their bedroom. He would put his laptop on his stomach as he laid down in a dark room, and the only light that he had was off of his computer monitor. And it looked freaky. So sit up, put your computer on something, put your phone on something stable so that you don't have it slide around, so that you're framed in there well, so that you look good and that you look your best. And for goodness sakes, keep awake when you're doing these. we have seen several people, and certainly some politicians, who might be falling asleep when they're doing some interviews. So we want to be careful of that. Another thing you want to watch out for are chairs that swivel. So I'm in a swivel chair. Look at this, I can spin around. Woohoo! If you're in a swivel chair, don't swivel. It's not that difficult. Or if it is difficult, get yourself a regular folding chair. One of the things that can be difficult, especially if you're on a Zoom meeting or a Zoom interview, and you're looking at the screen and you can see the other person, because let's face it, it's easier to talk to someone when you can see them. Or not that it's easier, because yes, we have telephones, but there's a better connection when you're talking to someone and you can see them. So if you are doing an interview and you're on Zoom, you're doing a video interview, it's hard to not look at the person on the screen. When you are looking at the person on the screen, you're not looking at the camera. One of the things that's hard to do is to look at the lens when you want to be looking at the screen. I mean, let's face it, when we talk to people, we like to look at them and see their reaction. And I've certainly been on the Polite Society podcast a number of times, and you want to see other people that you're interacting with, but sometimes it's a little strange. And I try to make a conscious effort to really look into the camera, especially when I'm talking. And if I'm listening to someone else, then I'll look at them on the screen. But when I'm talking, I try to make sure that I'm looking into the lens. If you do have pets, and pets could be like cats and dogs, or possibly even children, you do want to try to make sure that it's just you, and I'm not trying to say you can't have other people in your video, but you don't want it to be distracting to have some sort of a cat crawling behind you or up over your shoulder while you're talking. And there are some people that do that, and that's fine, but try to be careful, particularly if you're the interviewee, that you don't have any other distractions. I hope there's something that you gained from the presentation that we've done today. These are some things that I think are going to help you when you're doing some video interviews, whether you're the interviewer or the interviewee, or even if you're just going through some video meetings. One of the things that I really appreciate is the camaraderie and the family that we have in the gun community here. And I know that we're getting together here in Dallas for the AmCon, and I know that I'm doing a video presentation, and I'm here, and I'm running around working and doing some interviews. If you'd like to see more of the videos that I do, you can find Riding Shotgun with Charlie on YouTube, Gunstreamer, on the OpsLens app, on Full30. And if you do think that I have a face for radio, you can listen to the podcast version of my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and anywhere else where you can find podcasts. Thanks for watching.
And also have a really great sign-off sound, like hee. Because if Charlie ever does any video and he doesn't end with that, I have to do it myself, just sitting at home in my chair. It just has to happen. All right, well, we are getting ready to have a really cool, really interesting panel. One of my favorite things we do at AmCon is talking about how do we reach people outside of our echo chambers, right? And so this is the Beyond the Choir panel, and as my panelists make their way down, I'll take another quick quote from this book, Don't Drop the Mic, and it says, as you assemble any message, it's good to keep in mind two foundational pillars. Who cares? And so what? Right? Two succinct guiding questions instills all of a developing writer identity to their audience and keeping your audience in mind, as Rob Morse was talking to us about, and identifying your audience with who cares and so what. And so as we are trying to identify new members of our audience to ever grow our community, to invite people in, to mentor people in to this space of gun ownership, safety and firearms training, the idea of protecting and defending our rights. We want to try to be ever mindful that if these people care and they're saying, so what, right? We want to give them the so what, and we don't want to put in needless hurdles for them to try to jump over or climb through in the ways that we are presenting ourselves and the people that we represent. So, joining me on the stage, you've seen both of these people earlier today, but I will go ahead and reintroduce them. Chris Chang, our winner today of the Making a Difference Award. That was pretty awesome, right? Chris is History Channel's Top Shot Season 4 champion. After winning Top Shot, he left his job at Google. Now, how does the tech world blend in with the gun world? Well, here's an example right here. He left his job at Google to shoot for Bass Pro Shops. While he returned to tech in 2015, he is still actively involved in 2A advocacy through media, as well as having testified in front of Congress. Welcome, Chris. You can clap again. It's okay. I will let you. Right? Absolutely. And actually, we get a twofer right here, right? Because we have Ashley Lebinsky and Marley. He's a working dog. He's a hard-working dog. Ashley is one of the foremost authorities in firearms history, technology, and culture in the United States. Over the past decade, Lubinsky completely renovated one of the largest firearms museums in the country and currently consults for museums, serves as an expert witness, and is a published author and television personality, and also testified in front of Congress. And you can clap for her. So let me set my timer so that I don't go completely over, because that is my specialty, right? It is my superpower. You give me 30 minutes, I'm going to take probably 45. I'm just going to say it like it is. All right, so I have prepared a little bit of a list of questions, but I want this to just be a conversation. So we can go wherever we would like to go in this. But both of you fill a unique space, you fill unique spaces in this national conversation. Chris, you are not only from the tech world, right? You're not only Asian, which is, you know, a minority in our nation as well as in the firearms community, but you're also a representative of the LGBT community. And so you wear multiple hats, and each of them has a very unique dynamic and perspective as you've come into this space. And Ashley, you are an academic. You've been formally trained in college and universities, and that tends to be more liberal, as you were saying in your talk earlier. And you recently had a post that you put up on Instagram where you talked about something that's very, very personal, and we'll dive into that as we go on. But in a sense, both of you have experienced this idea of coming out, right? And I think all of us, individually, somewhere in our lives, there's something that we feel like it doesn't fit with whatever group, you know, whether it's the 2A group or whatever it is. And we have to kind of either hide or come out. And I just want to ask each of you, I'm going to start with Ashley because yours is very fresh and new. And some people may not have even followed you yet on Instagram, which we're all going to take care of immediately. It's History in Heels, right? Right? History in Heels. And talk to us about what it is that's so personal and this idea of coming out, and how did that go for you in the 2A community?
Yeah, so, I don't want to. Hello. Yeah, so, I mean, as Cheryl mentioned, I am a part of the academic community, which is very different than the gun world typically, but what Cheryl's referencing is the fact that earlier this week, I made a post because a couple weeks ago, and it was released last week, I did the Mental Health and Guns podcast with Walk the Talk America, and I'm starting to get more involved with them. And a lot of people, because I have a service dog, knew I had PTSD. What they did not know was that I had bipolar II disorder. So I made a post on Tuesday about basically what that means, because people don't know what that means. They have lots of assumptions of what bipolar I and bipolar II are. But then at the same time, the fact that it is really hard, and you fight this kind of really internal battle when you have a public face in the gun world, and then at the same time I'm posting about all the expert witness testimony that I do, and I've had people thank me for being such a great 2A advocate, and then in the same comment say, but you know, we could just keep guns out of crazy people's hands. And I'm like, huh, this is awkward. So for me, you know, and it's kind of interesting because the podcast came out last week, and I didn't post it yet. And it took me days because I just didn't know how to do it, you know. I got diagnosed last November, and so I've been coming to terms with what that means, and I learned that what that means is I'm no different than I was before last November. You know, I just have better tools in order to handle the fact that I talk really fast and get super passionate. So for me, it's been really interesting, and I'm excited to work with an organization that is helping to reduce that stigma within our community and outside our community.
And how has it been received by the people that did interact on your Instagram page or in other ways? Are people like, oh my goodness, or are they very accepting? Like, what have been some of the reactions?
Well, if you heard my talk earlier today, nobody called me an idiot, so that's progress. Woo! Honestly, it's been 100% positive. I don't think I got one negative comment on the different platforms that I posted on. I was really amazed at how people received it, but then also I got several text messages and several direct messages from people in the industry who are prominent people in the industry that also suffer from bipolar and other mental illnesses, and that they were just thanking me to come forward and say something. I think the only quasi-negative that maybe I had were a couple of people talked about red flag laws and how that me becoming public about my bipolar 2 disorder, how that could negatively affect me if someone from the other side were to report me. And then to which I wanted to respond, I think you guys are giving me far more credit for my impact in the country. But it was really nice to see how many people actually supported the move I had to come out and talk about it, and then how many people were like me that I had no idea. I've been looking for a community since last November, and I finally found one.
That is fantastic, and thank you so much for sharing that, not only here, but in the national sense, because obviously people are resonating with what you have shared and almost being like, oh, thank God I'm not alone, right? And I think that's so much, very often, what the Second Amendment community, always in air quotes, because like, what does that mean? We are so diverse, right? But so what we help people do, like, I want to be a gun owner, I want to talk about guns, I want to carry my firearm, but it feels unnormal. And so when we help normalize that in all the different ways, this is very, very powerful. So Chris's story, of course, we brought out his magazine earlier. This was a conversation starter across the nation. And when I saw it, I was just excited for Chris and excited for Recoil. I think they both should be congratulated because they're awesome brands and doing awesome work. But not everybody loved this, apparently. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, the Recoil cover, I mean, I think just to start at the basis of when the Recoil staff and the photographer and I were brainstorming about, okay, well, what kind of message do we want to send with this magazine cover? And, right, so we were brainstorming lots of ideas, and it really boiled down to wanting to encapsulate the idea that the Second Amendment is for everyone. So that was the core message of the Recoil magazine cover, and then of course, okay, well then, how do I, as Chris Chang, help reinforce that message? One component of me being Asian, that's very obvious. That was thankfully the non-controversial part of the cover. But the more controversial part was my LGBT advocacy, my being gay and being married to a man. And so let me explain the t-shirt that I'm wearing on this cover. So it is an American flag, and it is distressed, and it has LGBT rainbow pride colors. The purpose behind the choice of this shirt is to represent the polarization, the really, really rough times that our country, we are a distressed country right now. It's as if everyone's looking for a fight. Everyone's looking for some kind of controversy that there's just become a small, it feels like there's a smaller and smaller almost island for us to find common ground. So, this shirt, it really triggered a lot of people negatively in the gun community. It was a lot of bigotry and homophobia out on display. And I think for me, having been a Second Amendment advocate and an LGBT advocate, so I've been a firearms advocate for 10 years, but I've been an LGBT advocate for 20 years. So, for me, inbound homophobia or whatever, like I'm over it, I've been there, and you get a thick skin. right? When you start taking arrows for a variety of things. But I think what was surprising for me was it had been such a long time, I think, since I'd seen that kind of vitriol and that kind of negativity within the Second Amendment community, because I often surround myself with a lot of pro-freedom, pro-liberty individuals in the gun community who are accepting, who are diverse. You know, everyone here at AMCON and other conferences and conventions that we attend, we're almost a little bit of a bubble, right, within ourselves, which on one hand is wonderful, right? We all share common values and goals, but I think as outdoor media, we sometimes need to remind ourselves that, right, the gun community is very diverse in some great ways, and in some ways, not. And but for me, the negativity that was generated by the recoil cover controversy doesn't reduce my passion or enthusiasm to continue to say that the Second Amendment is for everyone. Even if you don't, quote unquote, agree with my lifestyle, which is a little bit of, it's sort of this, it's a backhanded compliment of sorts to say, I don't agree with your lifestyle. Look, that's fine and all. Like, my life is my life. Like, I'm not asking you to live my life. But I want to continue to build bridges and to build, dialogue, to foster dialogue. And at the end of the day, we're all Americans who are all in the pursuit of happiness. And the Second Amendment is one key part of that pursuit to safety and happiness. And that's why I think let's focus on that and all the other sort of issues. Let's put some things aside for some amount of time, and let's try and bond and connect over the things that we share.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. And, I've read our documents, right? Our Constitution I have set there, and our Bill of Rights, and I don't see any velvet rope language that says that it's for you as long as we agree with your lifestyle, right? So that is one of those head scratchers for me, that there's still even that kind of that caveat that people feel like they need to, throw out there. It's like, hey, I'm so glad. I don't agree with your lives. I don't agree that you should be telling people that why you have a service dog, but I'm glad that you're a gun owner, right? I think we can stop doing that. I think we would maybe be doing ourselves a better service, and inviting people in would be easier if we stopped doing that. So as you were talking, you, Chris, were trying to quantify something that I struggle with, how to phrase. And Ashley and I have, bantered about this and tried to, figure out what are we actually saying, and then let's say it. And it's the pro, fill in the blank, versus the anti, fill in the blank. A lot of times we say pro-gun and anti-gun. Well, that's too limited, because then it's just about the tool. Right? So then do you say pro-Constitution versus anti-Constitution? Is it pro-freedom versus anti-freedom? If that's the case, then what are the people they would consider themselves pro-freedom that are saying something negative to you because they don't like your t-shirt? Right? Do you not have the freedom to live your life the way you want and wear the t-shirt you want? Right? So Ashley, I'm going to bounce this one back to you. And you don't have to have the answer, because I don't think anybody does, but I think it's worth, kind of massaging the idea a little bit and trying to come up with what, from your background, what do you hear when you say the different terms?
Yeah, so I know we've talked a little bit about this offline, and I actually totally said pro and anti-gun earlier today, so I'm a hypocrite. But one of the things that I try to, the line I try to walk, because I do deal with a lot of academics, I deal with a lot of people who really don't like firearms, and so I try not to polarize one or the other. So you're not for us, you're not pro us, you're anti-us. And it's something that I'm never like. That's not just firearms, there's a lot of different things, because one, that assumes that one stance is good and one stance is bad, and again, I don't judge in people's heads and hearts, and if you are informed and make good decisions, that's not for me to tell you one way or the other. And so the other thing about that, too, is it creates a false illusion of duality. This is one way, whether or the other, and there's not a spectrum in between. And at least what I've found working, through a lot of different groups of people. I mean, you guys know David Yamanin, who's the professor of sociology at Wake Forest, who does the Culture 2.0. I mean, he's a liberal armed professor. And so I tend to encounter people who don't fit the mold more often than people who fit that mold. And so for me, I was trying to say in my talk today, firearms owners, non-firearms owners, people who like guns, people who don't like guns, people who are somewhere in the middle. And as much as I can't avoid whatever, but as much as I try not to say pro-gun, anti-gun. Recently, I know this is popular, I've started saying pro-gun and pro-gun control. Because then I'm not making a judgment, and I'm hoping they're not going to make the judgment back on me, I don't care. And so I've been trying to kind of counter since there isn't that negative. Because that was one thing that we had talked about, is why do we always have to take our positive and couch on the negative, and it comes down to pro and anti, and the fact that we and the other side, everyone in the middle kind of feels like you have to fit yourself into a little box, but people are messy, and so it doesn't really work. Wearing white is a terrible choice.
Because we are messy. Chris, what are your thoughts on that? Is there a better or worse way that we can quantify and label?
I don't think there's a better or worse way. The way that I think about this is it just depends on your audience. Who are you trying to speak to, and what are the words, the phrases, the approaches that you can use to connect with your audience? So to be frank, we're talking to the pro-gun crowd. You know what? Leaning into the pro-gun and anti-gun paradigm might be the most impactful way to get your message across. But if we're in a room of neutral Americans who maybe don't have an opinion, who don't really understand, many of us, are in for, Second Amendment rights. Maybe I'm not even going to bring Second Amendment rights into the conversation. It just depends. And I think the point of this great question, this conversation, as communicators and storytellers, I think we want to have as many tools in the toolbox as possible. Right? So there's something to be said about discipline, where we say the same thing as many times as we can. But, again, I think just depending on the audience, I think we can still send the same, but maybe we're using slightly different words or different phrases to avoid negatively triggering people, because we all know if we trigger people in the wrong way, then they turn off and stop listening, and then we might be quote-unquote right, but if we're not influencing, if we're not having the impact that we want to have, then it's all for naught. So I think there's not a better way or right or wrong way. I think it depends on the audience and who you're trying to talk to, who you're trying to reach.
And that, I think, sets us up for the next part of the question is, the Second Amendment of the Constitution, there isn't a conservative Constitution and a liberal Constitution, right? There's just one Constitution, and it's for everybody. And as our good friend Maj Touré likes to say, and I've been using this phrase a lot lately, if it wasn't written for me, it's mine now. Right? So we have one Constitution, but we have allowed the politicians to begin using not even just the Second Amendment anymore. It's the First Amendment, there's all kinds of amendments, but for the longest time, the Second Amendment has become this political football, right? It's getting beat back and forth between the two parties. And so it becomes less and less comfortable to be able to talk to our friends who might ascribe to, if I'm a Republican conservative, it might be harder for me to talk to my liberal Democratic friend about our founding document. How crazy is that? How go back to you, Ashley, how do you think that we can do a better job of unpoliticizing and renormalizing the Second Amendment? Because honestly, it is the most unifying thing. No matter who you are, what color you are, what age you are, what religion you are, we all want to protect what we love. And the Second Amendment protects our right to do that with the tool of our choice. So how do we do a better job, in your estimation, of that?
So I've written a lot of articles recently. Recoil's great. They really do give you a platform to be potentially edgy or unintentionally edgy. And so one thing that I've been trying to work through as a historian is the fact that this idea that firearms are a political tool or a political talking point is relatively new in our history. I wrote an article on liberalism and guns for Recoil where I actually, and I'm not a Second Amendment scholar, so I'm so sorry. But, I talk about the fact that a lot of the founding fathers were classically liberal or socially liberal, and the fact that, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is a socially liberal concept based off of John Locke's classic liberal concept. And so, if you think about it that way, I think a lot of liberals wrote the Second Amendment, didn't they? And so, for that, I kind of trace this idea of the firearm being a one or two party system. And it's just not that recent. I mean, you can look at some of the federal firearms acts, National Firearms Act was proposed during a Democrat president. It was also proposed by a Democrat. But it wasn't, it's hard to describe it. You see those trends, but it's not so divisive as it is now. Actually, in one of those articles I wrote about the fact that I interviewed Steve Sinetti, who used to be the CEO of SSF, because there used to be a congressional sportsman shooting that used to happen with politicians in all political, realms, and it used to be pretty much 50-50, Democrats and Republicans, and then in the last 20, 30 years, now there are no Democrats that go to. And so, to me, if I approach it from a history standpoint, and also one of commonality, there's a lot more commonality than we think, I still see it as a need to be political. It hasn't needed to be, the forefront of politics for most of history. We've got 800 years of history here, and we're talking about 20th century, part of 20th century, part of 21st century. And so for me, it didn't have to be. It hasn't always been this way. So let's find those points along the way, either where it changed or where we were able to have something in common and move forward.
Nice. That's awesome. Chris?
This is a great question, and I think the most straightforward way to depoliticize an issue is to not politicize it. And what I mean by that is back to the know your audience point that I made earlier. So I think when I'm talking about firearms, whether it's the culture or policies that are under consideration, I often don't couch this in terms of the Republicans or the Democrats or the conservatives or the liberals. Let me take an example. If I'm talking to an Asian American, I will often talk about guns very differently to an Asian American versus someone who's gay or someone who's transgender. The conversation, and the point I'm trying to make is the conversation will be tailored to what I think is important to them, or I will ask that person, what do you want to learn about firearms? And so from there, I can decide, should I go with a more data-driven, analytical argument or the historical route? Or I think for most people I find that if you just talk about it in the most personal terms, that's usually a winning strategy. So for example, in 2016, the Pulse nightclub shootings in Orlando, Florida was one of the deadliest domestic terrorist attacks in the country at the time, where over 100 people at a gay nightclub got shot or injured or killed. And so, the gay community had a very interesting response, right, to that this domestic terrorist attack, where you had some members of the gay community who were, they jumped on the gun control, bandwagon, and then others, right, jumped on the pro-gun rights, train. But so when I'm talking to a gay person about guns, I will often cite the Pulse shooting. And I will talk about the concept of, as a marginalized, as a person who is part of a marginalized community, where there are, and I hate to say this came out in the recoil controversy, and I hate to say this, but there are some Americans who celebrated the murder of gay Americans. And this was public and recoils, Instagram, comments. I mean, this is... It's an unfortunate and disgusting truth that anybody would be celebrating the murder of innocent people, regardless of whether you're an American, whether you're gay, whether you're a woman, whether you're a this or whether you're a that. So when I'm talking to a gay person, though, I'll say, almost every person in the LGBT community knows what it's like to have people hate you, to threaten you either directly or indirectly, to say things like, all gay people should be dead, transgender people are really messed up, and why don't they just go kill themselves? Like, these kind of really dangerous comments are incredibly hurtful, they're damaging, and they strike at the core of who we are as people. So, if I take that context, right, I set up the stage, look, here are facts, right, that we just know are true about the experiences of being part of the LGBT community, and then I ask the question, well, wouldn't it make sense for people like us to want to protect ourselves from people who want to do us harm, or people who want to harm other people in the LGBT community? Right, so it's a way to personalize. Right, this is not about politicizing. Right, it's like the same. Our lives are not about the Democrats or the Republicans. Right. The Second Amendment is not. It should not be a political football. And so I always try to talk about the Second Amendment or gun rights, or gun ownership, in a personal way that will connect and resonate with that individual.
Well, don't tell the media that it's not all about, our lives are all about politics, because it's going to blow their minds, right? They have no idea. Now, we have 3 minutes, so we could take a question or two if anybody has any.
Time flies.
Sorry, that's why we're
laughing. I know. Rob. Oh, let me bring you a microphone. Okay, I'll repeat the question. How was the article in Recoil received by the LGBT community?
Yeah, it's interesting about, in general, the LGBT community is generally very silent about my firearms advocacy. But within the Second Amendment space, in the gun community, right, there's an LGBT contingent who, they lit up the product. It was such a heartening response where I got, 100 plus DMs and emails from people, from Americans all across this country who were gay, and, it was the message that, wow, I didn't know that the gun community, celebrated people like me who are gay and who are gun owners, and being able to form that connection, though, right, and send that message that the Second Amendment is for everyone was really heartening for me, and I think at many points in all of our careers, we sometimes run out of gas in the tank. And say, how am I doing all this for? Is anybody listening? But you get, when I got feedback like that, it's okay. This is why I'm doing this, because it's helping other people feel not just good about themselves, but I guess it's almost the opposite, that they're not afraid, and they're not ashamed to be gay, and they're not afraid, and they're not ashamed to be a gun owner, which I think is really important. And I think that's a universal message for all of us in this room, right? That we shouldn't be afraid or ashamed of being a gun owner.
Nikki. This is exactly where I wanted to end, is have Ashley talk about, but basically, how can we do a better job of stop saying keeping guns out of crazy people's hands, and what does that really mean?
Yeah, well, and I'll first say, I'm very new to talking about this. As you guys heard me talk earlier, I was far more eloquent, but, and I'm still learning really what that means. Just because you have something doesn't mean that you're an expert on it. But it's true, I mean, there's a lot that goes on within the idea of mental health, and like I said, Walk the Talk is teaching me all about this. I actually have a family therapist who speaks the lingo for me. But the problem is that, and the thing I see that's most fascinating is we have people who say in the gun community it's not guns, it's mental health, and then you have people from the health community who say it's guns. And so if we in our community can see how nuanced guns are, firearms ownership is, why can't we see the nuance in the mental health community? And I know a little bit about the fact that you're correct. People with mental illness are more likely to be victims of a crime or to be more at risk themselves than they are to be violent. But of course, we also know that there are people with mental illness who commit, atrocious acts, but that number is relatively small from my understanding. And so I think it's just we need to understand, one, what it is to have a mental illness, and then two, the diversity of all of them, and the spectrum of them. I have bipolar 2, in no way, shape, or form similar to bipolar 1. It's a very, very different side of the disorder, and so we just don't know the nuance there yet in our community, and the mental health community doesn't know the nuance in this community, the gun community, and so for me, it's just, we kind of have to start, pinning up all the different areas and doing some real research on the mental health community, on gun owners, and the problem that's been, according to Jake from Walk the Talk, is that people aren't willing to talk about having mental illness and firearms and other firearms owners because they're afraid to have them taken away from them. And so because they're not talking about it, we can't get any decent studies or feedback on it. And so we just have no real idea. We're just kind of saying, well, this sounds right, this makes sense, and then we move forward from that. So it's complicated because no one's talking about it. And so I hope, by trying organizations that reduce the stigma, more people come out about having it, and that, it's normal too. And hopefully we'll be able to get more data on, how and why people do what they do, especially in terms of violence.
Very good. I'm sorry, we are over time, but I know that Ashley and Chris are going to be around, so please connect with them and ask your questions, because we have our next speaker waiting in the wings, actually in a video form, but I just want to thank Ashley and Chris so much for diving into these topics. We are barely scratching the surface. There is so much more to talk about, and I look forward to talking with you privately, interviewing you on our show so we can have a larger conversation, maybe even inviting you back again in future years for this audience. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Tony Simon. What did we just say? The 2A is for everyone. The second is for everyone. And that is Tony's organization, the 2A4E. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran, certified firearms instructor, and certified range safety officer. He's the founder and host of The Second Amendment is for Everyone, Diversity Shoot, and The Second is for Everyone podcast. It's dedicated to welcoming people of all races religion, gender, and sexual orientation and backgrounds into the firearms community, educating them on their civil rights and on the human right of self-defense while introducing them to Second Amendment advocacy organizations. Welcome via video my awesome friend, Tony Simon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Simon, and I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's a line from Ken Blanchard. He was one of my early role models in this, I guess, or him and Paul are two of the people that made me realize that advocacy is something I could do. So I want to tell you guys about how I started 2A4E and what my motivation was. And if you want to be involved in it, what I learned and maybe how that can help you. I'm sorry if I'm pausing because I'm getting feedback. So let's go ahead. I know a lot of you out there, a lot of you guys are friends of mine. So, but some people don't know who I am. My name is Tony. I was born in rural Virginia on a farm. I grew up with firearms, hunting culture. That's just what it was. Firearms were not taboo. And I joined the Marine Corps, as the kids today say, in the late 20th century. That's disturbing. And I served my time there. I was one of those kids that were always into firearms. Not in a freaky way, but in the kind of way that some people are into sports cars or sports and they know all the statistics. I knew about firearms. I knew every gun that you saw on the movie TV. I knew the history behind it. I would read all the books. Every book you could find, I would read. So that was me. I especially like surplus firearms. So immediately upon getting out the military, I purchased some surplus firearms. I purchased a 1911 because, you know, boomer. But that's what I did. And then I moved to New Jersey and I realized my rights were restricted when I ran into all the laws that applied to a New Jersey resident trying to own a firearm illegally. That didn't bother me because I already owned my firearm. And I didn't get politically involved. I really didn't until 2012. In 2012, my friend Sean Fisher and I from Black Bag Resources, well, actually, I took a class from Sean when he became an NRA instructor, and I enjoyed it immensely. I enjoyed the feeling I got when he taught me how to shoot again after I got out of the Marine Corps, because it's a perishable skill, and I was horrible my first range trip. And with one class in basic rifleman, I shot a quarter-size group at 25 yards with a 10-22. I love the feeling, and I wanted to give other people that feeling. So I became a firearms instructor. Sean and I went and got all of our certifications, rifle, pistol, shotgun, range safety officer, and I was about to proceed to be the greatest firearms instructor the world had ever seen. And then Sandy Hook happened. And that's when New Jersey legislators lied. And they had 76 bills proposed that were anti-gun. Everything from increasing the price of getting a permit to increasing the price to get a permit to more restrictions upon getting a firearm, magazine limitations, just everything you can think of. And that's when I wrote my first letter. That's when I got involved in advocacy. And that's when I started noticing things. And I'll just go through it because I numbered the different things I noticed and the things I'd love to tell someone else that wanted to start their own advocacy. Real quick, I just want to go over 2012. I wrote my first letter. I got involved in advocacy. I spoke in front of the assembly. I was a nervous wreck. You can see my video somewhere on YouTube because I don't remember a word I said. That's how nervous I was. Fast forward to 2015, after my last time standing in front of the assembly, there were over 200 pro-gun people. None were black, not one. And by that time, I taught several classes. I'd been to several classes. I knew black people shot guns. I knew Hispanic people shot guns. I knew Asian people fired guns. None of them were present during testimony. I felt that was important. I contacted the groups I'd worked with over the preceding 3 years, and I said, hey, do we have anything set up to get people of color involved in the political side of advocating for their rights? And everyone said no. And I was talking to my friend Sean about it, and he was like, well, why don't you start something? And I was nervous at first, but I eventually did at Gun for Hire Range in 2015. February 2015, I started the Second is for Everyone Diversity Shoot. That's what I've been doing ever since. During 2020, I thought we were going to be totally shut, and what ended up happening is, yes, New Jersey had all kinds of restrictions and wouldn't even open gun ranges for 6-8 months after restrictions, but other ranges did. So I was able to host events in Pennsylvania. We had a brand new range open up in New Jersey that somehow missed out on their closures, so I was able to actually go there. It got to the point that I was doing so many diversity shoots in 2020 that I was actually exhausted. 2021 came around, we did even more. We had more ranges, and even my friend John Anderson invited me out with the Nebraska Firearms Owners Association, and we did a diversity shoot in Omaha. So that's what happened with what we're doing since 2015 on something one guy said, I think something needs to be done, and I did it with the help of a lot of other people. So first thing I want to tell anybody who wants to get involved in advocacy or even want to do what I did, know your motivation. Know why you're doing this. If you're doing this to make money, yeah, no, just no. But you're going to have to know why you're doing this, and they're going to have to be deeper than that. You're really going to have a passion for this. If not, you're going to burn yourself out early. Number 2, start locally. People see what I'm doing. They see me on podcasts, and they were like, how can I go and do what you do? Well, I'm doing it with friends, lots of friends. And I got to know them because I started working with my local 2A groups. ANJFO in New Jersey, ANJRPC in New Jersey. I work with NRAILA. Because I've done the work, because I've gone and volunteered at events, people knew I was serious about helping. Because I testified, people knew where I stood. So that really helps. It really helps to build alliances and allegiances with people. And when I talk about the Second Amendment at our diversity shoots, that's all I talk about is the Second Amendment. Nothing else. I don't care about your religion. I don't care about your sexual orientation or your gender. I care that you're a human being. I want to introduce you to firearms and the firearms community and the human right of self-defense. Other than that, I love you as a human being, and I want you to be able to protect the ones you care with the most effective and efficient tool there is to do so. All right, one of the other things I also did was create an online image. People know me from online. They know me from podcasts. They know me from my social media. Well, when you're online, understand, you control that image. You know what people see. Your reactions and everything else is controlled by you. Don't get involved in petty squabbles or even big squabbles with petty people. You're not going to look like the bigger person to an outside observer who's just checking in, because we all know people have a very short span and they're not going to check back to what started this whole fight. So I really believe, be the person online that you want people to see. Also, part of that is know what you're talking about. Know your facts. When you speak on something, make sure what you're talking about is correct. And if you make a mistake, admit to a mistake. But know the difference between fact and opinion. There's a difference between what is a fact and what is your opinion. And the more you learn, if you're open-minded, your opinion may change. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just build diversity. I hate the way the word diversity has been changed to mean some silly political thing. I mean diversity, not in how people look or what they are, but what they think, how they think, and their perceptions. People are going to think different. You can't open the Second Amendment community up to only people that believe you believe in. That's ridiculous. You need to have people from across the spectrum, because the only way we can fight something that's turned into a political fight is to get people from the other side to join us in this fight, to realize that they're going to have to stop to all politicians that try to limit or restrict your rights. We're going to have to do this together, and we can't do it if you're only for people that look and think like you. It's just that simple. Also, you're going to have to become friends, associates, or allies with a lot of other people that may not have the same priorities as you, but you have to get on the same page. And that's what I suggest you do, is you make friends with the awesome human beings in that audience right there, the speakers. They're friends of mine, for real. I'm really bummed out that I can't be there today, but I have 3 more weekends left to move out of this home, and I have friends downstairs packing right now, so that's why I can't be with you. I got told something by a veteran of the Second Amendment movement. He said, don't allow this to take away from your family and ruin relationships. You have to be careful and allot your time. My wife has been wonderful as I've been doing Second Amendment advocacy. She knows what I'm doing, and she stands behind me, even though most of you have never seen her. Yes, she does exist. Most of you have never seen her, but she's one of the reasons, the main reason I can do this and go places and be the advocate is because I have her behind me. You just have to make sure you do a really good job and don't ruin a relationship or go broke during this battle. And that's the last thing. You will need funds. I've seen multiple arguments online about people, why would you ask for money? Why do you need money? Because the food I serve at my events is not free. The ammo we use at the events isn't free. The ability to travel to do these events costs money. There's a difference between trying to pay expenses and trying to become a multimillionaire off of the back of 2A advocacy. You're going to need money. You're going to need money to set up websites. You're going to need money to buy equipment for podcasts. You're going to need money for just a lot of different things. There's nothing evil about that. You use it every day. Just make sure you use it in a fight. That's about it, I think, for all the things I learned. I don't know if you guys are going to have questions. I can't hear anything from the audience. So if anyone has any questions, let me know. And I can also talk more about what we do and why we do it.
Thank you so much, Tony. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. And I love your patch. Explain your patch to those of us that are not quite sure why there's a man in a bubble bath.
This patch is something myself and John Crump came up with. And it's for, you can purchase one at blackswantactical.com.
I bought 3.
A portion of the funds, of course, goes to our fight. This started off at NRA 2016. I was exhausted, walking around the floor the whole time. I came back, and my wife was like, "Hey, you know the bathtub's up." I was like, "Okay." So I squirted some bubble bath in there, and I jumped in. And after the second rum and coke, I thought it was a good idea to take a photo of me and post it on IG.
Why
I
not?
said, "What's the worst that could happen?" So 2019 comes, Christmas, and a friend said, "Hey, can I make a picture into a patch, oh, excuse me, a sticker, and give it to our daughter on one of her presents because she loves you?" I said, "Sure," and that's what I did. Well, you had to make 25. So my friend said, "What are we going to do with 24 patches of you in a bubble bath?" I took them to SHOT Show and I gave them to everyone I knew. Aaron Paulette from Operation Blazing Swords and Pink Pistol called me up and said, "Hey, Tony, I'd love to use that sticker to make t-shirts, and we can split the funds between our organizations." I said, "Sure, no problem, but who the heck wants to buy a t-shirt of me in a bubble bath?" A whole lot of you guys did that. Thank you. So that has funded both our organizations since December 2019. And last month, Crumpy and Toxic Patch Company came up with this, and we're splitting the funds too. So because of one incident, NRA, money has been coming into Second Amendment advocacy organizations.
I mean, who doesn't want 3 patches with Tony in a bubble bath, right? It's you just can't get enough of Tony Simon. All right, we have like 1 minute. Does anybody have a question?
I want to get in a question that came, a comment
Sure.
that came in from Patrick Collins over the internet. Patrick, and I'll get this up on the screen here. Patrick says he loves your haircut, Tony.
Right, thank you. I was taking Charlie Cook's advice.
That's awesome. You and Patrick have the same haircut. It's quite lovely. Yes. So fantastic. Tony, thank you so much for. Oh wait, we have one more question. Tony, why did you give testimony stop giving testimony in 2015?
I started giving testimony because I was angry. I was tired of people putting words in my mouth. I was tired of my race being hijacked by a political party and my rights being, at least actually being taken away by that political party. So that's why I started testifying. I haven't testified in a while because those people made me feel dirty. I figured my advocacy would better served bringing people in and advocate for the Second Amendment. I will testify again, but I do not like it in any way.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. And with that, I think we will let you go finish packing. So thank you, Tony, so much for all you do. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Bye-bye now. All right. Our next panel is making their way forward. And I'm not moderating this time. I'm going to let these 2 awesome people just run with the mic. But again, going back to this book that I found just fascinating and talking about how we can communicate with one another better. There's one of the chapters is talking about you can take one word and it has so many different meanings to so many different people. And this particular word, he chose the word joint. He said to a cook, it conjures images of cutting chicken quarters apart. To a surgeon, it might mean examining an x-ray to research the tissue surrounding the patient's kneecap. To others, it might mean finding a supplier who who has marijuana for sale by the joint, and if he's arrested, he will be incarcerated in the joint. Street slang for prison. So when we are choosing words and communicating to our various audiences, it's important to realize that what a word means to you or a phrase could mean something completely different to someone else. And so the two awesome people coming up now are going to talk about how do we avoid verbal language landmines. And they are, of course, the locked and loaded Latinos. You guys can come on up. Johanna, Rosalie, and Rolando de la Vega. They're a husband and wife Second Amendment and rights advocacy team. From the outset, the goal of Locked and Loaded Latinos has been to expand the firearms and freedom movements from within the Latin community through education, enlightenment, and exposure. Each week, they discuss topics from the 2A advocacy, current events, cultural issues, and bilingual discussions on our rights and the founding documents. And that is a space that I can't fill. I can barely speak English, so much less, going through a podcast with two languages. I'm going to get your microphones, and then I am going to let you two run with it. Hang on one moment.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Cheryl. Well, like she said, I am Rolo. I'm known as the Puerto Rican Pistolero on social media. This is my wife, Johanna. She's Latina Locked and Loaded, and together we're the Locked and Loaded Latinos. I guess we'll go briefly through our origin story. We actually did not get into Second Amendment advocacy until about 2 years ago, and it was on November 2nd at the 2019 2A rally that we really became advocates, and we realized that this is something that we want to do. Before, I didn't really I came from a military family. I was a Navy brat, but my parents never owned firearms or anything like that. We did a lot of moving overseas, and owning firearms on military bases is pretty much impossible. So I didn't really grow up with that culture, always pro-Constitution, pro-Second Amendment, but I didn't own my first firearm until I turned 21 years old. And pretty much what the catalyst was, I was like what I would say most gun owners are. We kind of take our rights for granted, especially when you come from a state like Florida or Texas. You never really feel how important it is to pay attention sometimes. And it was actually on February 14th, 2018, that really changed things for us. We're from South Florida, so for those that aren't familiar with what happened on that day, it wasn't just Valentine's Day. That was the day that the massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas occurred in Parkland. So, Joe, if you want to tell a little bit about that.
That day, actually, I was babysitting my 2-year-old niece, cute little angel, and we were at a park in just a short walk from Parkland's high school. And nothing happened that day. I was trying to coax her down the slide. She's a little scaredy cat, and pushed her on the swing. And I went home and found out about what happened, that a monster killed 14 children and 3 adults that day. And in 2018, I was a very casual gun owner. It was a hobby. It was a sport. I did not even have a concealed carry license. And that was the day that I decided that I needed to get a concealed carry license, because if a monster had decided to take a walk, things could have been very different for me. So that was the day that I decided to see guns as a necessary tool for preserving life. And then Florida decided to, despite having a Republican supermajority and Republican governor, decided to start passing gun control and red flag laws. And that's when we decided to start looking at guns as a tool for freedom as well that needed to be preserved. That's how we became advocates.
Thank you. All right. So, are they? Okay, there we go. Perfect. So, well, let's get on to the topic that we're here to discuss, avoiding cultural and language landmines. So, Joe, let's get it started.
So this is AmCon, the Second Amendment Media Workshop. The majority of people who are here and who watch these things are people who are invested in advocacy, and we use different forms of media as our tool for that advocacy. Whether it's traditional media, some people consider themselves journalists, bloggers, they might work for real media companies, and you have the internet, influencers, and podcasters. We all use media to disseminate these ideas of freedom and to educate those who follow us on what's going on, especially with gun control and whatever legislation is trying to be passed. We do have the uphill battle of our current situation culturally is in America pretty anti-gun sentiment. There's a stigma behind it that we have to overcome, as well as a disinterest. Earlier today we were doing a presentation at the USCCA Expo. It was labeled minority within a minority, and it had absolutely nothing to do with us being Latinos. It was actually kind of clickbaity, but the real thing, the real message was the statistics that we wrote down about interest in the gun community in terms of advocacy, or at least caring about advocacy in terms of the Second Amendment. I think there was 100 million gun owners approximately, and then if you use the membership of the NRA as a kind of baseline, only 5 million of those gun owners even bothered to use that and care enough about the Second Amendment to pay into that. And probably 1%, so it's 5% pay in, 1% probably even care enough to do more than that. So that's pretty bad statistics. So as advocates, we're going up against media, culture, stigma, disinterest. It's a hard life that we have.
It is, and you know, one of the things that we discussed was the fact that even within gun ownership, Second Amendment advocacy is an extreme minority when it comes to that. Too many gun owners were like us. They were very casual. They took their rights for granted, and that's something that we need to change, especially now that we have the fastest growing number of new gun owners that we've ever seen. You know, over the last year, we've seen millions upon millions of new gun owners, and the fastest demographics are in the minority community, and actually black women specifically. So as we get now an infusion of new blood, or more people that are coming out into the open in the gun community, because some of these communities have always, they've had gun owners, they've had gun ownership, they have those traditions, but now that they're really coming into the mainstream and we're welcoming them in, we need to be able to avoid, you know, certain aspects.
So now we have one more thing to worry about.
Yep.
If we're working in media, it's avoiding stepping on those cultural landmines, because the community is changing. It is very diverse. It's actually more diverse than you even think about, because you guys probably look at us and go, oh, they're Hispanic. Well, there's like Mexicans, Colombians, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, Salvadorians. I can keep going. We're all not just one monolithic culture. We're very similar, but we do have differences.
We all supposedly speak Spanish, but I'm pretty convinced that Puerto Ricans like myself, Dominicans and Cubans, we don't always speak the same kind of Spanish. So it's actually very important to be cognizant of some of that, the cultural differences even within the Latin community, the Asian community, the black community. There are differences within demographics, different cultures, even different regions. Like we all know, Texans are very different than Californians, and they're very different from New Yorkers, from even Floridians. So we know that contextually already within even our own states. So imagine now we're bringing in other different cultures. Those are more things that we need to be cognizant of. And one of the things that we've seen is we really need to focus on educating ourselves on those points. Really paying attention, being cognizant of some of those differences. And it does require more work, because as Second Amendment advocates and members of the media, we are already at a higher level of scrutiny just by being, trying to have integrity, journalistic integrity. At least we try to in this community. I'm not sure about the mainstream media. But that's, something that we really need to hold ourselves to a high standard, first of all, as journalists and members of the media, and even higher being in the gun community, because we know that everything that we do, every bad example, every misconception is going to be used against us, and we're going to be bludgeoned over the head with it. So really, as the arbiters of the message, of news, of upcoming legislation, of trends, even covering new firearms that come out, we are on the forefront, and we have a responsibility beyond even just members of the Second Amendment or gun community to really be leaders in making sure that our message is accurate.
So how do we do this? First step of any kind of media-based journalism or podcasting is, if you are going to be doing a piece on a topic, no matter what you're doing it on, it is your responsibility to educate yourself and research that topic. True story, I'm not going to call out the publication, who wrote it, any of that detail, but a friend of mine actually two friends of mine were subject of a article in an established firearms magazine. I got a text, a screenshot of the article, and that person was livid. The article didn't mean anything bad by what they tried to write, but they were very insensitive about how they wrote it. Two problems. They wrote someone's name completely wrong. Bad one. Second problem. They didn't do their research. This was a member of the Black gun advocacy, and the way they wrote the article was as if this was something new that was just being heralded in. And it was written in a belittling way, too. I think the phrase was, bringing the good word of guns to the Black community. And it was just a little, it was a little insensitive, or I don't know what the right word to say is, but just wasn't.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Especially when you start thinking about, we just heard about Tony Story. He's been doing this since 2015. Before him, Ken Blanchard's been doing this for a really long time. So it's not like the Black community doesn't shoot guns. And care about their rights, absolutely. So I felt like he misstepped in not doing his due diligence as a journalist and investigating a little bit more about Black gun advocacy and their history.
Absolutely.
One more example, stepping out of the firearms industry, although this was a very much discussed topic in the firearms industry recently, Nicki Minaj recently made headlines because she decided to become political about something. I was actually incredibly surprised at the number of mainstream media, conservative pundits, Steve Deace, Charlie Kirk, really big names, didn't do their research on who this person was, and said that she sang the song WAP. That is a different person. That didn't go well, because I don't even have to say it, but that's disrespectful. So those are the kind of things you want to avoid, and you avoid that by doing your research. If you're going to write an article, you're going to interview someone, take some time and look into them. And for please, spell their name right.
Another thing that we really want to be aware of, and we have to be prepared to have uncomfortable conversations. Conversations about history, about personal experiences, and be open-minded and receptive to those experiences. One of the biggest, it's ironic, had great conversation last night that we had with Cheryl was privy to. We were there with Kevin Dixie, Yehuda Reamer, the Pew Pew Jew, and Charlie Cook was there as well. And it was great. Some of the conversations I think we spoke for around 5 hours last night. It was crazy. Poor Yehuda's poor wife. But you know, we had some really difficult, enlightening conversations. I'm sure that we were at the table and many of us hadn't heard these different perspectives before, and it was fantastic. But it was, you know, a passionate conversation, and it was a little bit uncomfortable, but at the end, everybody knew where they stood. We all learned. We became more enlightened. And we can't be afraid of those conversations. And it's, you know, one of the things that I see is we often talk about what is the reason for the Second Amendment. Self-defense, you know, being able to protect your family, and obviously standing up to a tyrannical government. And talking about examples in history, I've gotten more pushback from people in the gun community and people that are conservatives when talking about history and some of the negative aspects of what the government has done throughout history, how they've oppressed the American people, how specifically minorities were oppressed, black people, Native Americans early on. And it makes people uncomfortable to talk about that because the left-wing media has basically weaponized American history and tried to invalidate everything and say everything is wrong because America's a broken country. The founders were all racist. We have racism. This country was built on racism. That's not true. But we were never a perfect union. We've always been striving to become a more perfect union. And a lot of the times, it's not that what the founding document said was wrong, it's that we, as the American people from the start, never really lived up to the standards that we set for ourselves. And we cannot be afraid to talk about that and admit that, because it does not undermine our position when we say, this is where we went wrong, this is where we could have done better, this is where the government in the past has oppressed people because of their skin color, or because they wanted land, or for whatever reason. And we've seen this go on from the 18th, 19th, 20th, and even now the 21st centuries, we're seeing oppression from our government. So we shouldn't be afraid to talk about that and use that as examples, because it really reinforces our message. Because when you can go back and you can say, this is what happened. Slavery was a thing. Black codes were a thing. Jim Crow laws existed. We had massacres at Wounded Knee. We had Tulsa and Black Wall Street. We've even had medical experimentation on Puerto Rican women that was done by Planned Parenthood. So we have to confront all of these things. We can't be afraid to talk about them because it wasn't us. Let's be honest. We don't have to own up to that, but we need to set ourselves at a higher standard. And we need to be able to live up to what this country was founded upon. And we can't get offended. People are gonna feel uncomfortable. People are going to be heated. You're gonna hear things that you may have never wanted to hear before, or history that you've never learned about. And it should make you upset. You should feel terrible that these things happen. But again, the standard that we set here in the United States is we want to try to be that shining city on the hill. And we can't be that if we don't acknowledge what has happened so that we don't repeat it again.
Bringing it back to social media for the influencers, you need to police your comment section. Sometimes there's deliberately malicious conversations happening.
Yeah, that's what Chris mentioned earlier with Recoil and what happened with his magazine cover. And that's something, you know, we sometimes are individualists to a fault. You know, we allow, you know, everybody can say whatever they want, we can do that, but we have to realize that our audience themselves can be a reflection of our message. Mm-hmm. So if we may be giving a positive message, but if some in our audience are not receptive to it, and they, you know, bash people, speak poorly, say ignorant things, it may reflect badly upon us. And a lot of times you'll see some of the best engagement comes from the comment sections on Instagram, YouTube videos, things like that. So if you have somebody that may have gotten a recommended video, or somebody said, check this person out, they're awesome, and they see a toxic community underneath what was supposed to be, you know, a positive message, it can really undermine things. Because it's like, well, is this hypocrisy? Or do these people even believe what this person was saying here? And, you know, the fact that if you don't necessarily go in there, and it's not that you want to censor people, but you really have to be cognizant of those things, or at least call them out and say, hey, I'm not going to tolerate this kind of behavior in my comment section. Or if this is the type of person that you're going to be here, I don't want you to follow me. And we can't be afraid to alienate bad actors in our audiences. That's okay. They undermine us. So we need to do better and hold everyone to a higher standard.
And I don't mean jump into your comment section and start fights. You know, if you can do, you know, tell people I don't want this kind of energy in my comments. And if you really don't want to even engage in that, there's a beautiful thing called the block button. So use it. Throw in a block party. I love it.
Remember, and if you donate to Black Guns Matter, you'll get unblocked.
There you go. Something else that is important to be cognizant of when it comes to being aware of the diversity in the gun community now is sometimes when you're doing that research, you also have to think about the history of the culture in relation to guns. I'm going to bring it back to Latinos for a second. We're, like I said earlier, we're all different. I mean, Mexicans and Puerto Ricans can't agree on what to call a bean. No. It's a true story.
Yep.
How Colombian, like my family hails from Colombia. I have friends and people I'm very close with who are from Cuba, being from South Florida. You have to consider the history of guns in their culture to kind of understand why someone might be anti-gun or feel a certain way. For instance, Cubans might be very pro-gun. We have a lot of pro-gun Cubans. I also know some anti-gun Cubans because it's taking the history in different ways. It helps you kind of understand it. Come from a oppressive government, so some people are very pro-gun because they see it as a form of liberation. And then some people also see the gun as a form of oppression because they were used to oppress them. Going to my family history, Colombia has a weird relationship with guns. I think of guns as a form of something that scared me growing up. I knew people who were abducted by the FARC and cartels. You didn't go to certain parts of Colombia because people got killed in the 80s and 90s on the street. So those are things that kind of help you understand where people are coming from and maybe why they have certain feelings about guns. So that's something that's also important. Culturally, why people feel the way they do about guns.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really one of the biggest discussions that we have a lot of times within the Latin community. It's trying to break through that stigma of you usually only saw either a corrupt, oppressive government using their military against the people, or criminal organizations, drug cartels, using guns to basically intimidate the people as well. And many times you see the collusion of the government and those criminal organizations. So there's a negative connotation there. And we just need to be very cognizant of it, be sympathetic towards it, and explain, one of the things that we do on our podcast. Now we're probably gonna have to move on to the Federalist Papers, but that can be complicated in Spanish. But we started with going through each of the amendments of the Constitution. We would end our shows with a constitutional segment, and we would go through an amendment in English and then in Spanish, because we knew how important it was to bridge that gap. We have either people that may be our parents that may have immigrated here years ago, that they don't know English that well, or they were taught, obviously they were educated in their country, so they understand the history of their country, their laws and things like that, but they may not know all about American history. They know it's the home of the brave, land of the free, the land of opportunity, but they may not understand the why. So it was very important for us to be able to show the Constitution in English and Spanish, so they have the original context plus the translation, and then they start understanding this is what it's all about. And we would have different discussions about, the meanings of those amendments and things like that. And, people have been very receptive to it. I think it's been awesome, the feedback that we've received from that.
The easiest way to avoid cultural landmines, I'm going to be completely honest, I'm going to simplify it. Tony mentioned community and having friends around you, and that does help in many different aspects of advocacy. It helps kind of bolster morale and everything like that. When I look around the gun community that is now, how do you say that, a big, present, there's a ton of diversity. Everyone is super friendly in this community. Get to know them. Get to know Chris Chang. Get to know Beth Alcazar. She's a Viking. Get to know Tangi. Get to know Jay. There's just different people in this community. Get to know Edgar. We will have those conversations with you. If it's not advocates, if you don't want to be in here, just get to know people in your community. It's just enriching to get to know the world around you and learn from other people. That way you learn, and you won't make any mistakes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really just comes down to that. It comes down to communication, empathy, conversations, respect,
open-mindedness.
Yep. And we have to do all of these things. We have to be better. I think this community is great, and I think that we do a pretty good job at this. And we just need to, again, just like we want this to be a more perfect union, we want our community to always be striving to be better, to set the example, to normalize gun culture. And that's really what we try to do on our show too, to kind of bring it back, just some things that you can think of to do, and really bridging the gap, going after the youth and different demographics. If you watch our show, which is part of the Self-Defense Radio Network, like many of us here, thank you. A shout out to the Self-Defense Radio Network. Yes. You know, if you watch our show, and let's say that you just happen to be suggested YouTube video, something like that, you'll see that behind us, we've got Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man, different Marvel comic heroes, different video game paraphernalia, Star Wars stuff, a Mandalorian helmet. We've got Yoda back there. And so it's almost, I'm sure that you've heard the term, especially subverting expectations. The left loves to use this, especially in film. Let's subvert things. Let's do something crazy. Let's destroy a franchise and totally change it just because we can. So part of that, let's use some of those tactics. Subversion sometimes sounds like a dirty word, but it really isn't, because you just create something that people wouldn't expect, and that's what we try to do. So you look at, you see us talking, and you're like, oh, they're talking about video games, are they talking about movies, are they talking about pop culture? Yes, but we're also talking about the Constitution. We're also talking about the latest gun control. We're also talking about how 135 Republicans voted for H.R. 4350, including 8 of our state representatives in Florida. So all of a sudden, you come in thinking that we're going to be speaking about one thing, and boom, there you go, like a Trojan horse. We're talking about other things, and we're bringing other people in. And it really helps, and it helps normalize the gun culture and show we're just like everybody else. We're a husband and wife. You know, we do everything that everybody else does. We watch movies, we play video games, we love our cat, we take way too many photos of her. You know, just like everybody else. And you need to show that other aspect of it. It's not all about the guns. Obviously, the guns are great. Yes, we love it. That's why we're here. We believe in freedom. We believe in self-empowerment, in our independence, and just having fun, and the camaraderie that comes from the gun community. But we also need to show that that's not what we're all about. 3 minutes. If you want to do some Q&A, let's do it. For sure. All right. Yes, sir. What was the first part of your question again? I'm sorry. The gatekeepers. You know, we haven't had too much trouble with the gatekeepers because we have been blessed from the start that we came in a very positive aspect here. We went to the 2019 Second Amendment rally, and we went to a breakfast that actually Cheryl was a part of, Kevin Dixie, Tony Simon, and there were a few other advocates there. Jara Hutchins was there, and I believe Rebecca stepped in, and Tim Knight was there too for a bit. And immediately we were blessed that we came into this positive community. And actually, if we look back, you know, Cheryl was privy to this conversation yesterday. Our three biggest mentors in this community are not Latinos. It's Kevin Dixie, Tony Simon, and Argo J. They took us under their wing. And I think that's important. It's the mentorship aspect. So sometimes avoid the gatekeepers because a lot of times they're undermining themselves and they're becoming more and more irrelevant. Because as we see, you want it to be a party. So the gatekeepers are going to be there and eventually they're going to be alone. Meanwhile, they see all of us having a great time, you know, around the bonfire, hanging out like at Kevin Dixie's Train and Learn event, and that just destroys all of that. So sometimes it's just building the community within that community and just letting it go. Now, as far as the facts don't care about your feelings crowd, you have to use empathy first, and that's how we approach things. So, Joe, I think that you're great with this, talking to women.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know.
I just want to throw in, I don't care about everyone. Like, you don't have to like me. You don't want to hear what I have to say, great. Turn me off. You don't have to follow. I'm not here for everybody. I'm here for the people that connect with me. I get those DMs from someone, you know, hey, I'm really happy that I found you. You know, it's great to see another Latina, you know, representing, and that's what motivates me. That's what keeps me going. If someone doesn't like what I have to say, I don't care. I am actually doing my part and helping create a sense of community and helping people feel not alone and feeling represented in this community. I think we're done time-wise. Sorry.
I do have to get the big hook out, but yes, applause is awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for all that you do and for being here today. I think they're hanging around a while, so you can ask them questions, you know, offline, and that'll be great. And so we do have a break time right now, so you can, you know, maybe just continue talking here, but we have to turn the internet down for a minute, so anybody online isn't going to be able to hear us and see us for a bit. Couple of quick announcements. I want us all to get together and do a big group photo before the day is over, and maybe this break is the time to do it. I'm thinking we've already got the step stairs, so maybe we'll just do it, you know, kind of, you know, with the camera going that way. So after everybody gets a chance to take a quick restroom break and stretch their legs, maybe when we come back in, we'll do that real quick. Also, dinner tonight, 5:45. It's on your own. We want to, on your own dime, but we want to break bread together. So, restaurant, if you say you're here with Cheryl Todd, they've got a little room set up for us. So that's the big hook electronically. It just shuts me off. And Beth Walker is on our schedule earlier today. We weren't able to get her video, unfortunately, but she will be bonus material online when we get this all posted up. So run and have a good break real quick. Be back in 10 minutes. Susan's. Mm-hmm. Consider that your warning. All right, have a good break. Be back in 10 minutes. About doing a photo before we start up.
All right, and for everybody who is watching online, I'm going to cut the feed, come back in 10 minutes.